You know, sometimes life feels like it's just about to begin. Those moments when everything seems to be lining up, when all the hard stuff finally makes sense. That's exactly where Liese Dodd was in her life. She was young, glowing, and getting ready for her most exciting chapter of all, motherhood. She had picked out names, chosen the baby clothes, and dreamed about the moment she'd finally get to hold her little one for the very first time. Her whole world revolved around that upcoming day. But just a few weeks before her due date, all of those dreams were ripped away in a way that no one could ever imagine. When police arrived at the scene, even the most seasoned investigators were shaken. What they walked into wasn't just a homicide. It was something that felt deeply personal, cruel, and unthinkable. A mother-to-be was gone, and so was her unborn child. People couldn't wrap their heads around it. Who could do something like this? Was it a random act of rage, or was it carefully planned? Something building beneath the surface for a long time? As detectives started to piece things together, a disturbing truth began to unfold. This wasn't just about one violent act. It was about a trust, love, and danger that had been simmering long before that summer day in Illinois. So let's talk about who Liese was. Not as a headline, not as a victim, but as a person. To really understand what happened, you have to know the woman at the center of it all. Liese Dodd was more than just a name on a paper. She was a daughter, a friend, and a soon-to-be mom who had her whole life mapped out. Her story reminds us of how fast life can flip, how joy can be replaced with heartbreak in one blink of an eye. She grew up in Illinois surrounded by people who loved her the most, especially her mom, Heidi. The bond between these two was beautiful. Heidi wasn't just a mother, she was her best friend and her person. They did everything together, and that closeness never faded, even as Liese got older. Heidi used to call her my baby girl, and it wasn't in a childish way. It was said with pride and love. She could just tell they were each other's home. And people who knew Liese described her as warm, grounded, and genuinely kind. She had this energy that just made people comfortable. Even as a kid, she had that old soul kind of calm. Someone who listened more than she talked, and who always made space for other people to feel heard. Friends remember how she was the kind of person who you could call in the middle of the night when you were falling apart. She wouldn't judge, she'd just be there. That's rare, and it's something people never forget about her. She loved music, she loved fashion, and she had a bright laugh that could fill a room. But what really defined her was how she treated people. The small, thoughtful things, leaving little notes, remembering details, checking in on you just because she cared. Like a lot of young adults, Liese was still trying to figure herself out. She had dreams, goals, and her fair share of struggles, and she always pushed forward. More than anything, she wanted peace. She wanted stability, a home, and one day, a family of her own. And then, that dream started coming true. At just 22, she found out she was pregnant. And it changed everything. From that moment, she was all in. Her mom, Heidi, was thrilled. She couldn't wait to be a grandma. And for Liese, becoming a mom wasn't just something she wanted, it was something she felt ready for. She started decorating the nursery, picking baby names, and talking nonstop about what kind of mother she wanted to be. Her friends said she just lit up. There was this joy radiating off of her. She could tell that she was so proud and so full of hope for what was coming next. But as happy as she was, there were parts of her life that weren't quite so peaceful. Behind the excitement, there were shadows, tension, and uncertainty that she didn't always talk about. Still, Liese carried on. She smiled through it, stayed focused on her baby, and believed things would get better. That's who she was, strong, loving, and hopeful, even when life threw curveballs. Her story isn't defined by what happened in the end, it's defined by how she lived, by her heart and by her kindness. But as you'll see soon, the same heart that made her so compassionate was also the same heart that made her vulnerable. But sometimes, love and danger cross paths in ways we can't predict. Even though we focus on the story of Liese, it's important to pause and understand the larger context, the reality of domestic violence. Domestic abuse is far more common than people realize. It doesn't always start with physical harm. Often it begins with emotional control, subtle comments, isolation from friends and or family, or constant monitoring of someone's time and decisions. Pregnancy, surprisingly, can increase a person's risk of experiencing violence. Studies show that nearly 1 in 6 pregnant women experience some form of abuse from a partner during pregnancy. The stress hormones and life changes that come with expecting a child can unfortunately exacerbate controlling or violent tendencies in some partners. Friends and family can play a crucial role, listening without judgment, noticing unusual changes in behavior, and providing safe options to reach out to professionals can make a difference. It is vital to recognize these red flags: sudden anger, jealousy over relationships with others, unwillingness to communicate respectfully, or often an unpredictable behavior. If you or someone you know feels unsafe, there are resources available: hotline shelters and counseling services. In the United States, the National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-SAFE, 1-800-799-SAFE, offers confidential support 24/7. Sometimes just having someone to listen to can provide the courage to take the next steps towards safety. Domestic violence doesn't discriminate. It can happen to anyone, regardless of age, background, or circumstances. Understanding the warning signs and acting early can prevent tragedies like the one that happened to Liese. To understand how things unravel, we have to talk about the other person in the story, the man who would ultimately be accused of taking her life, Deundrea Holloway. Deundrea grew up in Litchfield, Illinois, a quiet town where everyone pretty much knows everyone else. On the surface, it seemed like an ordinary upbringing, but behind closed doors, things were far from stable. People who knew him said his childhood was rough. His family faced a lot of hardship, financial struggles, tensions at home, and general lack of peace. It wasn't the kind of environment that made you feel safe or supported. Those early years shaped him. Teachers remembered him as smart, maybe even gifted in some way, but always angry, always on edge. He didn't do well with authority, and he clashed with people constantly. As he got older, those issues grew darker. He started acting out, getting in trouble, and showing signs that something wasn't right. Later on, when psychiatrists and witnesses looked back at his behavior, a pattern emerged: signs of serious mental health issues and struggles that had gone mostly untreated. People described him as erratic, sometimes paranoid, sometimes talking to himself, and there were reports of him claiming he heard voices or that unseen forces were pushing him to act a certain way. Now, to be clear, having mental illness doesn't automatically make someone violent, far from it. But when it's left unchecked, especially when mixed with anger and instability, it can become a dangerous combination. And that's exactly what seemed to happen with Deundrea. He lived in that chaos, that storm inside his head, for years. People who knew him saw two sides: the charming side, funny, confident, sometimes even sweet, and then the unpredictable one, the one that could flip in an instant, who scared people without meaning to, or maybe sometimes intending to. Even before he met Liese, there were already warning signs: run-ins with the police, outbursts, small arrests, nothing huge at first, but enough to raise an eyebrow. Each of those incidents was like a red flag waving in the distance, but no one really stepped in. So when Liese met Deundrea, it was two very different worlds colliding. Hers was full of light and hope, and his was full of darkness and unrest. What drew them together, no one really knows for sure. Maybe it was charm, maybe she saw something broke in him and wanted to help, maybe it was love. But whatever it was, that connection would change everything. For Liese, it would end in heartbreak, and for Deundrea, it would lead straight to tragedy. The story of Deundrea also brings up question about mental health. While mental illness doesn't automatically cause violent behavior, untreated conditions, especially when combined with anger, instability, and or substance abuse, can contribute to dangerous outcomes. In criminal law, one concept that often comes up is competency to stand trial. This means a defendant must be able to understand the charges against them and participate meaningfully in their defense. Courts rely on psychologists and psychiatrists to assess mental state, which can sometimes delay proceedings. It's important to stress, most people with mental health challenges are not violent. In fact, supportive treatment, therapy, and medications are highly effective for maintaining stability. The dangers often arise when someone doesn't have access to care or when early warning signs are ignored. For friends, family, and communities, learning about mental health is crucial. Understanding the difference between erratic behavior and a true threat can save lives. And supporting individuals to get professional help before situations escalate is a proactive step that we can all take. Mental health isn't just a personal issue, it's a public safety concern, a community responsibility, and a matter of compassion. When Liese and Deundrea started dating, it wasn't anything out of the ordinary at first. From the outside, they looked like a regular young couple. Two people trying to figure out life, making plans, dreaming about the future, but behind closed doors, things weren't always that simple. Their relationship had its ups and downs. Friends said that there were moments when they seemed happy, laughing, sharing inside jokes, being affectionate, but there was also times that happiness vanished, replaced by tension and unpredictability. People close to Liese started noticing small things that didn't feel right. Sometimes she'd pull away a bit, or she'd make excuses for him, the kind of red flags that are easy to overlook when you care about someone. And like so many young women who find themselves in difficult relationships, she wanted to believe the best. She saw the person he could be, not necessarily the person he was becoming. Those who knew Deundrea said his moods could shift in an instant. One moment he'd be calm, almost charming, and the next he'd explode, angry, paranoid, saying things that didn't make sense. There were whispers that he had been violent before. It was hard to tell what was rumor and what was truth. Eventually, though, things began to reach its breaking point. Liese ended the relationship, hoping to move forward with her pregnancy and focus on her baby. She wanted peace, a clean start. She moved closer to her mom in Alton, Illinois, where she could have support and start preparing for motherhood in a safe space. Heidi was overjoyed to have her daughter home again, especially knowing Liese was due soon. The nursery was almost done, the baby shower had been planned, and it was supposed to be a time filled with celebration. But even with some distance between them, Deundrea wasn't ready to let go. There were calls, messages, arguments. You know how it goes. Those lingering conversations that start off calm and end in frustration. Heidi later told the police that Liese had been nervous. She had mentioned that she and Deundrea were no longer together and that things had gotten tense. And then, in early June 2022, everything came crashing down. Heidi hadn't heard from her daughter in a few days, which was unusual. They spoke constantly, at least once a day. So when her messages went unanswered, she immediately felt that something wasn't right. She decided to drive over to Liese's apartment on Bolivar Street to check in on her. It was one of those moments every parent dreads, but no one expects to ever face. When she walked in, what she found was unimaginable. Liese was gone, brutally murdered, and the horror that she saw would haunt her forever. Police and paramedics were called immediately. What they discovered confirmed everybody's worst fears. It wasn't just a homicide. It was an act of rage, something almost too cruel to process. Liese's injuries were beyond what anyone could comprehend, and the pain didn't stop there. She was 8 months pregnant. The baby she had been preparing for, the child she had already named, was gone too. 2 lives stolen in one violent moment. News spread fast across Alton and surrounding towns. The community was in shock. Even veteran investigators were shaken. They said it was one of the most disturbing scenes that they had ever witnessed. The impact on the local community was immediate and profound. Friends, neighbors, and even people who didn't know Liese personally felt the heartbreak deeply. Candlelit vigils were organized in her honor, with attendees sharing memories, photos, and messages to support. Local organizations stepped in to offer counseling and guidances to those affected, emphasizing the importance of mental health in the wake of trauma. Small gestures carried a big meaning. People left flowers, stuffed animals, and handwritten notes outside Liese's home, symbols of collective grief and solidarity. Schools and workplaces where friends and family of Liese gathered held moments of silence and memorials, acknowledging the loss and raising awareness of domestic violence. Community leaders spoke publicly about the importance of looking out for one another. They encouraged people to recognize warning signs, to support those in toxic relationships, and to intervene safely whenever possible. Liese's story, while tragic, becomes the catalyst for education and prevention, inspiring conversations about safety and awareness across Alton and beyond. The search for the person responsible began immediately, but it didn't take long for suspicion to turn towards one name, Deundrea Holloway. Detectives started piecing together a timeline. They learned that Deundrea and Liese had recently ended their relationship. A witness recalled seeing him near her apartment around the time that she was last seen alive. Then came the security footage, a key piece to evidence. Cameras from nearby businesses and residential buildings showed a man matching Holloway's description walking in the area. Police also recovered items that appeared to belong to him, linking him directly to the scene. An arrest warrant was issued, and within days, Deundrea was taken into custody. When officers found him, he was in another town, and his behavior immediately raised concerns. He was agitated, speaking nonsensical, and at times refusing to cooperate. At one point, investigators said he seemed almost detached from reality. The evidence stacked up quickly. Blood evidence, witness statements, and forensics findings all pointed towards him. And when police presented their case to the Madison County State's Attorney's Office, the charges that followed up were staggering. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 for Liese and 1 for her unborn child. In addition, he faced charges for intentional homicide of an unborn child, dismembering a human body, and concealment of a homicidal death. It was almost too much to take in. For Liese's family, especially her mother, the grief was indescribable. Heidi told reporters that her daughter had been so excited to become a mom. She had her entire life ahead of her. Heidi found herself planning a funeral for both her child and her grandchild. The community rallied around the family. Candlelit vigils were held in Alton. Friends and neighbors left flowers, teddy bears, and handwritten notes near her home. Everyone who knew Liese spoke about how kind she was, how much she loved life, and how much she looked forward to her baby's arrival. The case against Deundrea Holloway moved through the legal system with intense scrutiny. His erratic behavior during initial hearings, shouting in court, refusing to identify himself, and claiming that he didn't recognize his own name, prompted a court-ordered psychological evaluation. A process was painstakingly slow but necessary, ensuring that he was competent to stand trial. Experts assessed his mental state from every angle, reviewing past psychiatric history, behavioral problems, and witness statements. Some reporters suggested he could participate in his defense, while others argued that he was unfit. And back and forth stretched the timeline, prolonging the family's pain and leaving the community on edge. Meanwhile, prosecutors meticulously built a case that would leave no doubt about his involvement. Blood evidence, forensic analysis, security footage, and witness accounts created a comprehensive narrative of that fateful day. Each piece of evidence strengthened the case, ensuring that when the trial finally arrived, justice would be fully pursued. While Liese's story is heartbreaking, it also serves as a stark reminder of the importance of awareness, prevention, and education. Relationships, especially those that show early warning signs of instability or abuse, must be navigated carefully. Trust your instincts, listen to friends and family, and never feel ashamed to seek help. Education about domestic violence, mental health, and community resources can save lives. Organizations like the National Domestic Violence Hotline, local shelters, and counseling services provide guidance, protection, and hope for those in danger. Awareness campaigns can empower communities to recognize and intervene safely when someone is at risk. It is also vital to talk about mental health openly, reduce stigma, and encourage access to care before situations escalate. Supportive communities, early intervention, and education are all key in preventing tragedies like the one that took Liese's life. For Liese's family, especially Heidi, honoring her daughter's memory remains central. She often spoke publicly about Liese's life, her kindness, her joy, and her dreams. She shares the same name that has been chosen for the baby, Milo, and emphasizes that love can persist even in the face of unimaginable loss. The legal process continues, but the impact of Liese's story has already extended far beyond her community. People across Illinois and the country have heard her story, learned from it, and been inspired to act, whether by checking in on loved ones, supporting victims of abuse, or advocating for stronger protections against domestic violence. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just another true crime story. It's about real people, real families, and the lessons we can take to make the world a safer place. Liese Dodd was young, she was hopeful, and she deserved so much more. But through remembrance, education, and advocacy, her legacy continues to make a difference, one life, one conversation, and one action at a time. As we come to the end of Liese Dodd's story, it's impossible not to feel the weight of what was lost. A bright young woman, full of hope and love, and the baby she carried with so much anticipation. Her story is tragic, yes, but it also carries a lesson that is deeply important. Every detail of her life reminds us that behind every headline, there is a person, someone who laughed, loved, dreamed, and had a future that they were excited to live. Liese's story isn't just about crime that ended her life. It's about the joy she carried and the relationship she nurtured. and the positive energy she shared with everyone around her. Her family's response, the strength and grace of her mother, Heidi, in particular, shows the power of resilience. In the face of unimaginable loss, they can become voices of awareness, education, and prevention. By sharing Liese's story, they honor her memory in a way that can inspire change and protect others. For viewers, this story can serve as both warning and a guide. If you or anyone you know is in a relationship where fear, anger, or control are present, don't hesitate to reach out. Support is available, and no one should feel alone or unsafe. Simple acts, checking in with friends, recognizing warning signs, or contacting local resources can save lives. Liese's story also highlights the importance of mental health awareness. Early intervention, compassionate support, and professional care are essential. While not everyone who struggles with mental illness is violent, unaddressed mental health issues combined with anger and/or instability can lead to tragedy. Communities, schools, and families must remain vigilant and supportive. Beyond the practical lesson, Liese's life reminds us to cherish the time that we have with the people that we love, to tell them that we care, to hold space for one another. Every gesture, a note, a kind word, a shared moment, carries meaning. In remembering her, we honor not just her loss, but the way she lived. To truly honor Liese Dodd, consider taking action. Share her story to raise awareness about domestic violence and/or mental health. Support local organizations that can provide help to at-risk individuals or families. Educate yourself on warning signs and preventive measures for toxic relationships. Reach out to loved ones, check in, listen, and be present. Liese may not be here physically, but her life and her legacy live on through these actions. Every step taken to protect someone, to listen, or to intervene can ripple outward, potentially preventing future tragedies. And to Heidi, the mother, the advocate, the unwavering presence in her daughter's story, your courage and openness have inspired so many. Through grief, you have transformed pain into a platform for awareness and change. Liese's life is remembered not for the way it ended, but for the light she brought into the world. Finally, for viewers, take this moment to reflect. Appreciate the people around you. Speak up for those who cannot, and understand the fragility of life. The true crime stories like Liese's are heartbreaking, but also remind us why compassion, vigilance, and love matter more than ever. Liese Dodd's story will stay with us all, not as a statistic, not as a fleeting headline, but as a reminder of a human heart behind the tragedy. Her joy, her hope, and her courage continue to inspire. Thank you for taking the time to listen, to reflect, and to honor her memory. By keeping her story alive, you are part of a larger effort to raise awareness, protect the vulnerable, and to ensure that lives like Liese's are remembered for the light that they shared, not just the darkness that took them away. If you found this story meaningful, please consider sharing it. Like, subscribe, and engage with the community. In memory of Liese, in support of victims, and in hope that awareness can prevent future tragedies. Until next time, stay safe, protect one another, and remember that real love should never hurt.